Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 16th edition of the Dasra Philanthropy Week. For a decade and a half, DPW has been shaping conversations, sparking collaborations, and driving real impact across India's development landscape. And today, we kick off yet another incredible week, one that challenges us to think bigger, act bolder, and reimagine India's future together. As we move closer to India's centenary of independence, DPW 2025 is a platform for us to collectively envision a future rooted in equity, resilience, and opportunity for all. This year, under the theme Rising at 2047, we are bringing together visionary leaders, philanthropists, and changemakers to explore bold collaborative solutions to systemic challenges and driving change. Before we dive, just a few housekeeping reminders for us to ensure a seamless experience for everyone. To maintain clear audio and speaker focus, participant mics and videos have been disabled. Please respect speaker privacy and refrain from sending personal messages. Use the chat feature to ask questions and engage in discussions. If you face any technical issues, send a private message to the host for assistance. And finally, Hindi translation is available throughout the session. Simply press the globe icon to access it. Thank you for joining us, and let us get started. In 2022, a group of scholars and development practitioners interested in advancing dignity came together to develop the consensus research agenda on dignity and laid out 5 fundamental questions. How is dignity to be defined? How can respectfulness be measured? How do dignity and respect operate? What acts increase perceptions of respectfulness, and what are the consequences of that? How do actors and sectors regard dignity, and what actions will increase support for a dignity agenda? And finally, what will it take to answer these questions with more than just powerful intentions? I am Sangeeta from the Dasra team, and in association with ID Insight, I'm very excited to bring together an inspirational group of practitioners and thought leaders, one of whom has drafted the research agenda to dig into some of these questions and hear perspectives around placing dignity at the center of all our work. We are very pleased to have with us today Carolyn, who is the Vice President of Give Directly, where she's been at the forefront of the world's most innovative cash programs, including setting up the world's largest and longest study on universal basic income. Carolyn brings decades of experience in the development sector and represents a clear voice, seeking to end extreme poverty, stemming from her own experience of growing up in poverty in rural Kenya. She powerfully anchors all practice and work in the principles of dignity. Welcome, Carolyn. Next up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sangeeta.
Next up, we have Suganya, who is driven by her very strong belief in community-led transformational change and works together with the indigenous forest-dependent Adivasi communities in Gudalur, Tamil Nadu. As a part of People's Collective called the Vishwa Bharati Vidyodaya Trust, or VBVT. She is an educator and the co-facilitator of a community-led initiative mobilizing children and youth towards creating meaningful and culturally sensitive learning spaces at the village level. As a non-Adivasi person supporting an indigenous-led collective, Suganya is deeply intentional about honoring the lived experiences and perspectives of the community. Welcome, Suganya.
Thank you.
Finally, we have Tom, who is a director at ID Insight and leads the research and advocacy efforts on dignity and respect in international development. Prior to joining ID Insight, he founded the Dignity Project, a campaign for more respectful international development, and wrote the consensus research agenda on dignity. He's also the author of Marketplace Dignity, published in 2024, and has previously led Raising Voices work to prevent violence against children in schools in Uganda. He works passionately to advance justice and create better governance through useful research, and believes that research is most useful when it grapples with questions of power. Welcome, Tom. Thank you for joining us today, all of you. Tom, I would like to start with you. The dignity movement, the metrics and the practice building has been crafted with a deeply intersectional and nuanced lens with your thought leadership. As we start this session, I would like for you to share with all of us why dignity, what got you started in this journey, and now that the global movement that ID Insight is housing with so much of power and respect, what is it that sparked this entire journey for you?
Sangeeta, thank you. Hello, everyone. thank you also for accommodating having this meeting in English. I appreciate it. It allows me to participate. A few years before I wrote the consensus research agenda, and really before this work started in earnest, my father was coming to the end of his life, and he was in and out of hospital. He was a really stubborn man who would often get into arguments with the medical professionals. And one of the things I observed in that was that the professionals, perhaps especially the nurses who had less power otherwise, would start to withdraw. Many of them were wonderful, caring professionals. All of them were very exacting in the timing that they administered the drugs, the procedures that they carried out. But they would start to withdraw the human element. And this became really agonizing for Dad. There was something huge missing from their care that was beyond and bigger than their professionalism, beyond and bigger than their exacting administration of the right drugs at the right time. That was the experience of somebody in a wealthy country, from a person of a relatively high income, in very well-resourced hospitals. It must be, and our research shows it is, so much more common for people's dignity to be disrespected when they enter into those interactions with fewer capabilities, without the same resources that my father had. And that leads very often, when people are encountering the rickety bureaucracies of aid, of NGOs, of government, of schooling, of medical care, that so often leads to this crucial human element being denied, and to people therefore leaving those interactions, even when they get the crucial material aid they need. Even when they get that, people are still leaving those interactions feeling bruised, upset, not treated as they ought to be treated. And that really is what we want to talk about when we talk about dignity, is the ways in which people are not treated as they ought to be treated when they encounter these bureaucracies and interactions.
Super. Thank you, Tom. And just on that note, if you could also help us maybe understand what is it that you are trying to accomplish as an objective through this research agenda at a global level?
Yeah, I am a researcher by temperament. I'm fascinated by research for its own sake. Knowledge is a wonderful thing. Knowledge that sits on shelves would do a gross disservice to the human importance of this agenda. If it's just more books or more reports that live on files and occasionally get downloaded, then we are not supporting people's lives. People all around the world tell us that dignity matters to them. They may have different definitions of that, different ideas of what it would mean to be respected, but every moral tradition in the world has an idea that how you treat people as a virtue of their personhood is really important. And we have a duty to fulfill that. So my work has focused so far on the aid and development NGO complex and the ways that they can take on some of the learnings that they have already been in the medical field. The medical field has a lot further to go, but there have been some important learnings. And finding and researching practical steps that those organizations can take on I think in due course, that is something that is crucial for governments as well. But let's start with NGOs and think about how charitable organizations can take up the interactions to better live out the value that many of them profess to care deeply about people's dignity.
Thank you, Tom. With that, Suganya, I would like to come to you. As part of the Rebuild India Fund, we were fortunate to visit the work that you do with very unique 4 different indigenous forest-dependent communities in Gudalur, Tamil Nadu, in very different contexts. But in your work, as somebody who is not from the community but has been working with the community for so long, help us understand what has dignity meant for you in your work. How have you navigated some of the challenges that you have seen in working with different kinds of stakeholders while keeping the values of your community front and center?
Yeah, it's a deeply personal question. And I think what has really been a cornerstone of the work that I do here with the Adivasi communities, specifically with children and youth, has been to really understand who they are and where they come from, which means to also place dignity in their context. So dignity is not this abstract theoretical concept. It's for Adivasi communities, it is deeply intertwined with their relationship with their land, their culture, their language, their histories, and also their aspirations. It's a very embodied and lived experience. And I think as someone who's a non-Indigenous person, working together with them, it demanded that I unlearn, I uncondition myself, and really authentically show up and work with this understanding of dignity. And consensus-based decision-making, mutual respect, and the worldview that all of us are interconnected and all of us deserve dignity, not just humans, but also non-humans. We all deserve dignity and respect just because we exist. It's not conditional. It's not based on you or me performing in that context. I'd like to share an anecdote, and this was very recent. And I think accountability in organizations is something that all of us, be it at a system level, be it at an organization level, be it at a group level, is something that we all think a lot about. And we were having a conversation with one of the person. It was a conversation trying to nudge the person towards accountability and to also look at how we can do better. And my partner, my peer, who's also from the community, Karalin, so when we were debriefing before this conversation, he said, Suganya, yeah, whatever it is, let's ensure that through this conversation, this challenging conversation, let's ensure the self-esteem, the confidence of that person is not taken away, while at the same time, we are able to nudge accountability. And I do think in a world where we are to look at people solely just based on their work and the value that they bring based on productivity and work, to be able to look at the person as a person and meet people beyond these programs and professionalism is something that we've got to intentionally practice and cultivate. And fortunately for me, rooting myself and placing myself, being very aware of my positionality and placing myself together with people from the community, right from decision making regarding programs and approaches to feedback conversations, for conversations around monitoring and evaluation, positioning myself as part of that group has really helped me, and it has also enabled people from the community to lead from their lived experience and lead from their worldviews. And this has been a very enriching experience.
Suganya, with that, if you could also talk to us about some of the challenges that you have faced, right? Because of course, you've not been alone in this journey. It has also meant that you're working with a lot other stakeholders. So if you could talk to us a little bit about the challenges.
I think the challenge, mainly two challenges that I would like to highlight, is acknowledgement that the pull from the mainstream is very real. I feel like NGOs and organizations and philanthropists that work with indigenous communities more often than not come from a place of assimilating them into the mainstream, into their ideas of development, into their ideas of what it means to be successful and develop. To be able to negotiate and navigate that pull, and to consistently practice an alternate space rooted in these values, which requires dialogue, which requires showing up consistently, has been a challenge because we exist in a world where these inequities and these push and pull exist. And I would say the second challenge has also been um, to um, take time, and to not feel rushed in this entire process, to take time and to be patient and to grow slowly, and not get caught up in frameworks and outcomes and and to really focus on the process. And when I say focus on the process, to travel together with people, it's a great opportunity, but it is also challenging given some of the dynamics that we face with funders and other NGOs, where people are really boxed into programs as beneficiaries, and people's lived experience is located in a problem, not in a possibility. And I think these are specifically two challenges, which is an everyday ongoing challenge.
Thank you, Suganya. Very powerfully framed. With that, Caroline, I come to you. Shifting context at a global level. Now, you have worked for so long with many communities in rural Kenya and outside. If you could talk to us a little bit about in this entire philanthropic ecosystem in development practice, how do you see dignity playing a role in shaping or shifting power dynamics?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. And as you said, when you're doing the introduction, I come into this as someone who's had lived experience in a rural context, having experienced aid and its impact in communities, both positive and negative. If we reflect back on what has been happening in the aid sector, it's been a conversation that has been centered around a savior mentality. And at some point, the aid sector itself started asking itself questions around whether it was ethical for us to call ourselves the saviors of people who are stuck in poverty and vulnerability. Now, that was basically an effort to sanitize the intention. It was not a real, genuine intention to change from the inside. So the savior mentality has since changed, and poor communities, vulnerable communities today are called emerging markets. Now, when you think about an emerging market, it's basically in the interest of the person who is bringing the assistance. So again, it doesn't put people at the center of decision making, and it doesn't give them a voice. The biggest challenge that aid is facing today is not paying attention to local knowledge, local needs, and local interests, and incorporating those in solutions. We come with pre-baked solutions, and we come with the assumption that we have the solution that can deliver those who are poor and vulnerable from their suffering, primitivity, and vulnerability. And we make them receivers of aid with, an intention that we may create change and better life, but underlying that, there is also the interest of those who are bringing the aid. That is the biggest problem that nobody talks about. Who benefits from aid? And when you think about who benefits from aid, you will then get the answer for why aid has not centered dignity and trust. Aid has been made a trade. That is why poor people and vulnerable people have become markets. Today, you can see how people are competing. to be the first to bring up an innovation, to be the first to start a technology, to be the first to bring an evidence on the table. It is all so capitalist in nature that the poor people remain so far away from the solution. If you think about today that we are getting into this big data, dark web, artificial intelligence, and all these machine learning creations and algorithms, in whose interest are those algorithms created? Where is the voice of the local person in the creation of that algorithm? Where is the voice even after it has been created and it's being implemented? Can they be able to say, no, this doesn't work for me? Can they say, yes, this is working for me, but at a cost? Who gives them that voice? This is where we are missing the link. Development has always positioned itself as the solution for the global problems that we are experiencing. Yet we know that we still have so many people who are still living in extreme poverty, who are still living in extreme vulnerability, who have no voice and who have no choice. It is even more scary that as we look at the world today and the projections for what will become of poverty by 2050, that 2/3 of the population of the world are going to be living in poverty either because of crisis, disasters, climate change. Where is their voice? Will they be able to say what works for them to turn around for things they've lost, for lives they've lost, for experiences they'll be going through at that moment? Over the past 25 years, I've been working in the aid sector. I've worked in different sectors from health to education to microfinance to neglected tropical diseases. And recently, 9 years ago, I joined this organization that I am in right now, Give Directly, and it has given me a turnaround in the way I think about poor communities. Because I lived in a world where we designed programs, we took solutions to communities, and we told them, you know what, because you're suffering from malaria, this is what we are going to do for you. We are going to bring you bed nets, we're going to give you what, but nobody addresses the pools of water that is living endlessly in their compounds and in their neighborhoods, which only they can provide solutions to. Then we come back and tell them, you're very primitive, you're not able to use latrines, so we are going to build for you latrines, and we're going to make them workable for you. We do not understand how those latrines are going to integrate with those communities. I'm talking to you about projects that I have personally worked in. Today I work in a program where we literally send cash directly to people unconditionally and let them use it to solve their problems, because we don't know who is having a health issue, who is having an education issue, who is having a nutrition issue, and we do not know how they want to approach that solution. Their privacy, their choices, how they catalyze that money. And one of the things that we've learned in one of the programs that we've done, that when we give cash directly to communities, it multiplies 2.5 times. Who has done that in the aid sector? Who can give us that type of evidence that you give people the resources and you let them do whatever it is that they can do with it, and they turn it around 2.5 times what you gave them? There is so much for us to answer. Back to you, Sangeeta.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. So, yeah. With that, if I can turn it back to Suganya, and if we talk a little bit from a future-looking view now, if you had to draw a little bit of your vision as it relates to how do you think people should think about centering dignity, given all that we heard and spoke of so far, what was missing when a lot of people design high ambitious large scale projects, and therefore what needs to change? Your views there.
Yeah. A lot. I'm drawing also a lot from what Carolyn and Tom said. I think the human and the personhood gets missed in all of this. I'd like to invite all of us in positions of influence and in positions of power to really think about and rethink our ideas of development. How do we define development, and with who are we deciding this together? And is at the end of the day, are our initiatives building solidarity? Are our initiatives building relationships within the community? Are our initiatives building voice, choice, and respect? I think if we are really able to answer these three questions together with people from the community, where there's also space for critical sharing, not just a performance where, just as a tokenistic kind of a discussion where people come in and people are made to perform and say what you want to listen. But at the end of the day, if these three things goes missing from any program, I do think at the end of the day, whatever outcomes that the program intended to begin with will not be delivered. And I will share an example, right? And because I worked a lot on education and with children, and education is something that's heavily invested in India as a sector. So we go to this village and we are having a meeting, we're having discussions with people in terms of what is the nature of learning that they would like to be provided for children, and how is it that they would like to participate. And in one of those conversations, there's these two women who said, but there are two more organizations who are coming with the same programs, and it's creating confusion for us within the village. It's creating divisions within the village because the people who are supposed to deliver these programs are also people from within the village. So how do we solve for this problem? Because for them, this comes secondary. A strong sense of community, solidarity, and standing together in the face of everyday lived experience of inequity is more important. And now to be able to pivot the program, to pivot the approach to be like, how do we center this? And how now do we work together? And there was this beautiful solution that a youth member said, like, okay, to the outside world, let's just say, okay, this person's doing this person's doing this person's doing this. But for us, can we do it together? Can we have spaces where we come together, decide what is it that we want to do together for our children, and be able to draw in support and resources that's being provided, but in a way they would want to. And I think it shifts the way people participate in these discourses, in the way people show up, and also deeply in the way people think about themselves, where there is this critical awareness being built that people are not the problem. Problem lies in systems and structures that either that are existing or that are being created. So from that point of view, to really ask ourselves, how is our program, and from whichever positionality that we are, be it a funder, be it a volunteer, be it someone who works with marginalized communities, how are we showing up, and what are the answers for these three questions, right? How is the in terms of program? And I think what's also missing is commitment, to show up and be there long term, and and to support long term. Because development is slow. If we want development to be inclusive, and if we want development to be from the intentionalities of dignity, power, building people's power, I think development will be slow. And to also, and what's another, the third thing that's missing is I think we are so quick to locate people in problems. We're so quick to say, oh, Adivasi children have the highest dropout rates. Oh, Adivasi youth are unemployed. Oh, Adivasi communities are backward. It's so quick to define our problem statements. But can we also define the abilities and the thought leadership and the leadership and the ideas that these communities also bring in? I think that is so important. And to start from that, I think gives me hope to engage in this from a more creative space and not from a savior space. And I would really like to end by reminding us of of Leela Watson. She's an Aboriginal artist and leader from the Moori community in Australia, and she said that if you are here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if your liberation is deeply connected to mine, then come, let us work together.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you. Caroline, if I come back to you now, again with the future-looking view, if we had to think about what could be some of the indications of success, right? To make sure that we are able to place dignity across everything, across stakeholder groups, for funders, for NGOs, for communities. What would be some of those indications of success? And what's your hope in that direction?
Absolutely. So I'd want to start off with something that I've been thinking about lately. And it's something that I hope that those who are interested in being actors in the development space can start embracing, which is collaborative ethnography. And when we think about collaborative ethnography, is basically when you're thinking about something that you think could work, can you just double check with the communities that you want to implement it in to make sure that it is speaking to what they think is also a solution that works for them? Basically, let's include communities as co-creators, co-designers, and implementers of programs that work for them. The second thing is we cannot run away from the advancement in technology and the possibilities that it is bringing. So in as much as we are talking about all the, mistrust and lack of dignity in how we are implementing technology-driven innovations, there is an opportunity. We can promote technological inclusion even at the community level. We can promote digital inclusion. We can promote more awareness and let people know the potential and opportunities that there is in technological advancement and what in the small ways that they have, they can be able to do to be able to participate in that space, and that they can do it respectfully, recognizing what it contributes to them. We need to decentralize development. We need to take development closer to the people. We need to get solutions from the people, understand what their situation is before implementing. And this is something that also speaks to a lot of the researches that we are doing. And it might be time for us to ask ourselves, how much of a generalization do we make with the studies and evidences that we are implementing? A lot of times we get the comfort of, because it worked in one location, it will definitely work in the other location. Because you're looking at that community with one lens. Either they are the same gender, they are the same age, they are the same race, and therefore it will work for them. It doesn't work like that. Social dynamics are very, very different. Environmental factors are very, very different in different locations. And let us be able to provide respect to the local knowledge, local sensitivities, local solutions. And let us empower people to have a voice on the table, to be empowered, to speak and to be contributors. Let us also start investing in innovations at the grassroots. How is it that innovation is only looked at from technocrats, from elites, from, big guns in the sector? Those are the people who can bring innovation. When can we bring confidence in communities and let them believe in themselves and know that even in their own knowledge, awareness, experience, they can innovate and their solutions can become bigger and better every day? That is why I was talking about the clamor for excellence. Everybody wants to be the first on the table with the newest thing in the space. Nobody wants to give poor communities, the opportunity. There's another thing that I want to speak about, Sangeeta. This is going to be the final thing that I'm going to talk about. It disturbs me a lot, the information divide that exists between the people who are bringing development and the communities who are receiving development. When change is being discussed and the things that are perceived to be the biggest ideas, the biggest innovations, they are only discussed in boardrooms. They are never taken down to the communities. And I want to share just one story so we can put this in context. One time I found myself in a space speaking to local organizations here in Kenya to talk to them about how they can do advocacy with the government at the national level and international organizations. And I interact with this woman who has gone to school up to master's level. And in her ingenuity, she says, I was working in the insurance sector, but I saw the suffering of women in my community. And therefore, I stopped the work that I was doing with a big salary to go down and start doing small projects with women who are living with disability in my community. And what they would do is make hair wigs and knit clothes and then sell them at a poultry in the community for food, for these women to be able to get some food for their children. The big NGOs, international organizations, national government, and big leaders in the government identified this woman, and they knew that she was able to mobilize women living with disability. So whenever they have big events, International Women Days, I don't know, national what is happening, everything international and everything national, that would give the big people a big name. You know, we are serving disabled persons. See how we have mobilized 200 of them. They have come. And then they are given $2 to go home at the end of the day after sitting in the sun the whole day to showcase their disability. When I was speaking to this woman on this day, she broke down and she started crying. And she told me, I don't see anything different between you and I. I don't see why I have gone to school and I don't know what you do, these things that you're telling me. How is it that I don't know them, Caroline? What has happened to my life? Am I rotting? And you know, the problem is the information divide. That there is so much that we know, but we keep it in our boardrooms, we keep it in our offices, we keep it in books, and we never go to local communities to share this information with them, to empower them so that they can be innovators, they can be thinkers, they can be part of the solution. We want to hoard information so that we are the first on the table, so that we can be the people who can say that we are the ones who have the solution. And these people continue remaining in the communities, waiting for us to save them yet again. We will never be talking about dignity until we break the information divide and we bring information to the people who can actually break down that information into units that can serve humans. Let us not serve our big interests, capitalistic intentions of making aid a trade to make us rich and, well, you know, famous, rich, and I don't know what else I can say. Information divide, Sangeeta. If there's anything you can do, let us promote information divide and empower people with information, because sometimes people don't even need the money. They just need the information and they will go out there. Because I spoke to this woman, she didn't ever come back to me, but by the time she was speaking to me 6 months later, she had funding from the Japanese government, from the Swedish government, from the national government. She had gotten cash transfers for her disabled women. She has a vibrant project that is thriving just because she was empowered with the information. I hold it there.
Thank you so much, Karen. With that, Tom, if I can bring you back in, I think, of course, we heard a lot about what are the challenges and what needs to change, and very clear hopes and visions. If you had to talk about the tool that the ID Insight team has developed, which is how do you actually embed dignity into all of the work that everyone is doing across the spectrum, right? So if you want to talk about the tool a little and what's next in the movement, and something that all of us can take away from, I think it'll be very valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone can hear from the voices on this conversation how urgent this is. And DASRA and Give Directly and VBVT and ID Insight come from very different places in the spectrum of the development world. And yet we have all converged on this idea as a way of expressing and diagnosing the pain that that development is causing, even as it is also helping and advancing people's lives. I can see in the chat also that there are many people on this call who are sympathetic to that idea. So if we're going to advance this movement, if people are going to move forward with this, We need practicalities. We need specific things we can do and say and consider in order to make our organizations move. We need to know what are the statistics we take to our bosses. What are the changes that you make when you're designing a program? There's a whole set of things we might consider there. But I think the most crucial one is diagnosis within our programs. Figuring out, we know the work that we do, maybe the non-profits we run, or the grantees we give to, or the programs we design or apply for funding for. We know that they are well intentioned. We don't do them with, intending to do harm. And yet, we have also heard in this call that very often we accidentally generate that harm. So, the first duty we all have is one of diagnosis, finding out, are we getting this right? There's a few ways you might do that. There are survey measures to ask people, and there are qualitative ways in which we can ask people. Caroline was talking earlier about ethnographic methods. There's so much powerful work we can do. If we're going to do that, we often need a bit of permission. There's somebody we have to check with. I mean, maybe some of you are the budget holders here and now, and you can just go ahead and do it. In which case, great, let's go ahead and do that and change the programs. But where I suggest we start is a really short exercise, which is the Dignity Self-Assessment Tool. I've just put a link in the chat, dignitycheck.idinsight.org. This is something we've been developing, which is a very first step. Well, maybe the first step is attending a call like this, but let's call this the 1.5 step, which is a short exercise, 15 minutes or so, in which you can reflect on your own organization and how your organization does things, or if you prefer, your program. It's designed most with aid-giving organizations, implementing organizations in mind, although I think the experience we've worked with philanthropic organizations and they found it pretty intuitive as well. And it asks us to consider four things. First of all, how are we prioritizing? So is the program, the main thrust of the program that we are proposing or implementing, is that in line with what people would want? How do we know? Is this a priority for the community? The second thing it looks at, and this is perhaps the most important because I think it's where it most often goes wrong, is our external interactions. As we continue this program, how do those people it is designed to serve experience it? How do they find it? What evidence do we have on that? Third is internal interactions, because all the organizations that have gone furthest in promoting dignity say that you can only do it when you start from a culture of dignity, when you make sure that you're treating one another in a way that respects people's dignity. So our internal interactions matter. What is it like to be assigned to a project in your organization? What is it like to request the right kind of leave benefits? Do you feel you can attend to your other responsibilities in your life? Those internal interactions. And then finally, feedback and learning. How are we knowing if we're doing well? How are we figuring out if we've got better over time? So those four areas, we ask people to reflect quite briefly on these. Like I say, it only takes 15 minutes, but it's a great place to start. Once we do that, we can move to what do we do next? How do we correct that? That will often be very contextual, although we've been building up research about what works, and we'll send out after this call a copy of the most recent edition of our annual Dignity Report, which reflects on what works well, what evidence do we have when it comes to implementing programs that better respect people's dignity. But first of all, I would love for people who are moved by this, who have been moved by what Suganya and Caroline are saying, to begin a process of diagnosis within their organization and give that dignity check a go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Tom. I think we already have put the link on the chat. And with that, we come to the close of this panel, although I think we can go a lot longer with the discussion. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Suganya, for lending such powerful perspectives and for taking out the time to come together and speak about this very critical issue today. I do think we have maybe time for 1 or 2 questions, and I see that we do have a few from the chat. So if you don't mind, I'll place maybe 1 question that we can address and then close this. I think one common one that has emerged is while many funders may understand the value of community-led work, how can nonprofits establish an equitable relationship, which is basically how to help with the power dynamic angle. And I know that all 3 of you spoke about this in different ways. So opening it up for anyone who can respond to that. Would like to respond to that.
I have a couple of words to say, if I may, which is that there will always be a power differential between those with money and those without. Development is defined by its power differentials. If there were no power differentials, our work would be over and we could all go back to working in insurance. But even where there are such differentials, it is possible to have more or less respectful relationships. And people consistently ask for 3 things. Actually, I think Suganya put it very well. Our evidence shows that people consistently want recognition, to feel seen and see themselves represented when they're interacting with an institution. They want agency, they want choices and a meaningful chance to consent. And they want equality. Even where the power differentials persist, you can still sit down with somebody on the same level. You can still meet as if those power differentials were not there. And those 3 areas, just as an NGO distributing aid can take up those 3 areas in the moment of its distribution, so too can a philanthropic fund take up those 3 areas when they are dealing with their grantees, their applicants, including their failed applicants, and they can lightly, gently urge their grantees to take up this agenda too. The organization The Life You Can Save, we have collaborated a lot with. Now, if you wish to be recommended by The Life You Can Save as a charity that people will fund, you must justify the ways in which you as a grantee respect the dignity of the people you serve, and there's a set of questions you have to answer. We don't necessarily cut too many organizations out at this point, but we make sure they do the reflection. We make sure that they justify this. And that change has led The Life You Can Save to begin reflecting more on, well, what's it like for our grantees, for our recommended charities to go through this process, and how can we make that more gentle, more human for them?
Yeah. And something that I would also like to add to what Tom said is power is very limited and the power differential exists. So yeah, not-for-profits can do, and I would say I would really urge not-for-profits to say no more, because if certain things are not aligning, I think it's better we don't partner with organizations where principally and value differences exist to stand our ground, while at the same time, gently also inviting the funders and philanthropists to really look into areas that they can give away power and create that space so that not-for-profits, communities, people can come in and have a seat at the table. So I think power is very limited and it works both ways. Like for people to take power, there has to be people who are also willing to let go of power from a very deeply introspective space.
Thank you so much, Suganya. In the interest of time, we are not able to take any further questions today, but we will keep this conversation going. And if need be, please do write to us. We'll make sure that we are connecting the speakers to those questions. Thank you once again to all the 3 speakers for joining this conversation today and for a very engaging audience. We would now close this panel with a feedback poll. So please, before you leave the session, fill out the feedback poll that will just feature on the screen in a bit. And then, yeah, on to the next session. Thank you so much, everyone.